All right. Hey, what's going on? Jeff Barnes here again. So today's topic is I'm actually going to go through a deal review and talk to you guys about an acquisition that we just closed in one of our companies, Patriot Growth Capital. Shout out to my guys over there, John, Zach, and Zach. Fucking killed it. You know, they worked their butts off and dealt with the SBA, dealt with the seller, the lenders, everything, you know, raised the capital for the down payment, all that stuff. And I'm just going to walk you through some basics. I'm not going to go too far into the details and not disclose anything that I shouldn't be disclosing, but I want to talk to you about the whole process of going through and you know what we had to deal with when it came to closing this acquisition. So first and foremost, we're buying companies. And I think this is a really cool thing. It's why I'm part of this company. Again, it's Patriot Growth Capital. So big shout out to them. We buy companies that are in the defense and dual use technology space as well as e-commerce. Then we go out there and we find veterans, military veterans, you know, folks like me that have great resumes from the military. And if you were not in the military, you don't know what the hell a great resume from the military looks like. Sorry, but I don't care how many fucking boxes you check saying, oh yeah, we love veterans, we hire veterans. If you don't have people who are veterans who are doing the hiring and involved in that process, shut the fuck up. Like, to be completely frank about you, you are doing something called virtue signaling. And I hate that shit. It's almost as bad as stolen valor. And if you don't know what that is, go look it up. There's a lot of great memes on that. Sorry, I was eating my chocolate chip cookie here. It's fucking amazing, by the way. And every now and then, you got to have a little water here. So we actually go out there. And we have a nonprofit, ATL Vest, run by Zach Knight, amazing organization. If you're looking for a philanthropic organization to get involved with, Knight is fucking amazing. You know, Army veteran, unfortunately, medically discharged and whatnot, didn't want to be, but had to be, do some things he went through. And I still make fun of him, but that's because I'm allowed to. I'm his business partner and I'm a veteran as well. Anybody who's not a veteran making fun of him, he was in special forces, so be careful. Anyway, the fact is that we know what a resume from the military looks like. And a lot of guys that did great shit in the military don't talk about it because, let's face it, you won't fucking understand it. You will not understand. I don't care if you watch every movie out there, you will not understand what it was like to go through the training, because most movies don't show you the training that people went through. And if they do, they glorify it, or like Full Metal Jacket, they just want to make it look like this, you know, incredibly harsh environment where there's actually no brotherhood involved and everybody hates each other and we're just all miserable together. That's part of it, but we build this incredible bond and we do amazing things and great shit happens in the military. But if you weren't in, you don't know what they went through and you don't know the mindset of these people that did certain things in the military. Like, if you tell me that somebody is an E9 special forces, deployed here, deployed there, went to this theater, did this kind of thing, I have a pretty good fucking idea what they went through. Not only in those areas, but also to get to that rank in that role. Okay. That is not easy. If somebody tells me that they were a chief warrant officer, I know what that means. A limited duty officer, I know what that means. You know, again, if you were not in, you did not serve, how could you possibly fucking know? I'll give you an example. When I was in the Navy, I was in from 2000 to 2006. I joined as a nub, non-useful body, but I did okay on my ASVAB. I didn't do amazing. I did better than a lot of people, I guess, but I joined because I wanted to get out of Carbondale, Colorado at the time. You know, when you're a teenager and you know what you're going to do with your life, small towns suck, right? Now, looking back on it, of course, it's an amazing town, amazing little bedroom community of Aspen, fucking beautiful. There's no reason I should have ever wanted to leave, except that there were no prospects for me in my career there. I wanted to play baseball. That was out the window, you know? And so this guy shows up and says, hey, man, you're pretty smart. You do well in math. You want to join the Navy? We can get you all these bonuses. Oh, great. Sign me up. Let's do it. The pitch was literally, you're going to wear a really cool uniform and chicks are going to dig it. All right, that's sweet. What they didn't tell me is that when you're on a submarine, no chicks even know you exist because they don't even tell anybody where you're showing up around the world. So good fucking luck in that endeavor, right? You know, a little thing that they put on the asterisk, they left out of that in the contract with me. They said, oh, you're smart. You can go to the nuclear engineering program. Great. I did that. I went through the nuclear engineering program. And by the time I was done on a submarine, I'd done a few deployments. I'd done dozens and dozens of underways. I'd spent, you know, hundreds of nights underwater and had been away from home more often than I was at home. I was working on nuclear power systems. I was working on high pressure steam systems. I was writing quality assurance packages for our boat. We had implemented brand new water technologies that had not existed anywhere else in the entire fleet that we had to install, and we had to test, and we had to vet, we had to verify it was going to work. We went out. I was standing in an escape hatch at one point going down to test depth, which if you think about this bottle, down here, below here is the submarine, above here is the ocean. Up here is a hatch. All right, that's the escape hatch, and under here is the hatch that goes down to the rest of the crew. I was standing inside this thing while we went down to test depth to make sure that the top wasn't leaking. I was the only one really at risk, right? If that leaked, I'm dead, right? To me, it wasn't a big thing when I was doing it. To so many other people that I've talked to, like, oh my God, I can't even imagine being on a submarine, you know, claustrophobia and scary and all that sort of shit. Yeah, I get it, I guess, but that was our lives. I was in charge of, I was an engineering watch supervisor. I was an E6 by the time I got out. I was in charge of the quality assurance program boat-wide. That's why I was doing that other job. And I was a Navy diver. You know how much training I had to go through to get to that level? I had a division of about 25 guys underneath me at one point. I was in charge of the machinery division. I was in charge of a lot of shit. A lot of responsibility. You know what job I got when I got out of the Navy? Because I wasn't going to go work in nuclear power. I wasn't going to work in a cubicle, and I was not going to do shift work. All right. Those are my three. I'm not going to do this shit. Which, if you don't have the things that you're not going to do in life, you need to make that thing right now, because that's how you at least stay somewhat sane. If you just take any fucking job you can get or do any business you can get just because you want to make money, you're going to hate yourself. All right. Figure out what you don't want to do. All right. That's what my suggestion. But those are the things I didn't want to do. And I got a job. And they're like, hey, guess what you can do? You can become a boiler inspector. I'm like, what the fuck's a boiler inspector? You know, like, I worked on a nuclear power plant with steam generators. Like, oh, it's basically the same thing, but instead of using nuclear power and superheated steam and hot pressure, hot water, we're using fire and gas and things like that. Okay, cool. So I go do these boiler inspections. Guess the vast majority of the time, you know what I was looking at? Air tanks and hot water heaters. The same thing that you have in your own garage, that's at an auto shop, that you have, you know, in your own house, your own hot water tank. That's what I was looking at. That was the level of responsibility that the civilian world felt I was capable of. All right. You know how insulting it is when you get out and you do all these amazing things, and then they put you in this fucking role because they don't know what the hell you did. They don't know how to justify or quantify your capabilities in the civilian world. Now, luckily, I'm an ambitious guy. I made it through that. Over the course of a dozen years, did some amazing things at that company. But the fact is, going back to this, if you were never in the military, I'm sorry, but you don't have any fucking business talking to people and figuring out what skill sets they really have. Now, yes, they need to have soft skills, right? They need to know how to talk to people and interact in a civilian workforce. I get that, right? So you do need some of that shit. But you can't judge these people that have spent years, and in some cases 20 years or more of their life doing something amazing that you could never understand. And so we actually have ATL Vets, it stands for Advancing the Line for Veterans, that runs these people through the ringer. And we teach them how to become a civilian worker and ultimately an executive, and then eventually a business owner. And we walk them through the entire process. What's that going to look like? And in that process, we find people that we think are suited to run these companies that we then go and acquire. Okay. That's the business model in a nutshell. Our private investors are making nice returns because they're owning a piece of this business that the veteran then becomes an operator of eventually. And they get qualified small business stock incentives, a Section 1202 exemption in the IRS, which says, hey, if you hold this stock for 5 years or more, you get, 100% tax-free gains, things like that. There's a lot of caveats to that, but that's the high level thing. So we find this business. All right. Now, first off, anybody that tells you, oh yeah, you can go out and find businesses all day long. There's all these brokerage sites, there's all these different things. You can go buy a business. You know what? How many hundreds of businesses we looked at to finally get one, not just under contract, but all the way across the finish line to close it. Like, there was literally hundreds of businesses we're looking at. We submit LOIs on a few. That means a letter of intent. So you submit the letter of intent. This is what I think your business is worth, and what I'm willing to pay for it, how I'm going to structure this deal. If the seller agrees, which generally they don't agree with your terms right out of the gate, unless you're an idiot and just offer them everything they want. You shouldn't do that. Then you end up in a situation where now you get to go do due diligence. Okay. Due diligence means you're viewing and reviewing and vetting every little thing about that business you can possibly do. This included site visits. It included meeting with the sellers. It included meeting with the team. It included reviewing all their financial documents and statements. It included getting lawyers to go and verify that all of their corporate governance is in place. It's a lot of fucking work. And why do you do that? Well, because you don't want to buy a shitty business that's not going to spin off profits and it's not going to work for you, or that you don't know how to operate long term. So we went through that whole process. And my boy Zach gets, he's going out there and he's the one getting the loan, because when you get an SBA loan, you have to personally guarantee the loan. So he has to personally guarantee the loan. In another episode, I talked about how onerous that SBA process is. The underwriting guidelines are intense, and that's for a good reason. I just don't like it. All right, just to be completely clear, I hate dealing with that kind of piddly bullshit. I'm really glad that Zach had the mentality to stick with that, because that's what got us through. So you end up getting you get a $5 million loan for this kind of business. Go through all this process, go through all the underwriting, back and forth with the bank, back and forth with the buyer. Oh, hey, it's taken us 3 months now. So now we need updated financial statements. We need new quarterly balance sheets and profit and loss statements. Everything needs to be, reconciled properly, right? We need to do a review on this. Oh, you need to make sure you have key man insurance, and you need to have this kind of insurance, because if you die and you sign on the loan, well, how are we going to pay off the loan? Like all these little things that you have to check off on these boxes. Meanwhile, you want to make sure the seller is not taking their foot off the fucking gas, because you might find out by the time you finally close on a deal that it's worse off than when you initially brokered it or negotiated it, right? And again, if that happens and you spent 6 months in some cases dealing with the banks to get to that point, and then the banks say, okay, one final review before we send the money over, before we close this deal, we need to review the financials again, and we need to make sure that you're still making money and that you're still going to pay off this loan. If the seller took their foot off the gas and all of a sudden the profits are going down, the bank says, sorry, we're done. All right, that's happened. I've seen that happen several times, actually. Again, another one of the reasons that I'm not a big fan of working with banks. I'd rather work with private individuals. Now, on the other hand, if you have a guy or gal who is selling you the business and takes their foot off the gas, it means they didn't really have a business in the first place, because if it's contingent upon them constantly pushing and pressuring everybody to do their jobs, it's not a real business, right? You're self-employed with a few employees. That's great. But you need to have a business that runs without you, which means the team knows how to do that. So we're reviewing all their operating procedures. What are the job descriptions? Who are the employees? What are they doing on a daily basis? We're learning all this stuff. Zach and John and Knight, they all went through this whole process consistently. And then in the meantime, we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how much are we going to get from the bank? Dog, you stink. That's rude. Sorry. My dog's in the office here, and she tries to remind me every now and then that she's a little bit too comfortable. Sorry, disgusting. Too much information. Sorry. Anyway, so the fact is that when you're going through this process, you are hand-holding a lot of people. Okay. To buy a business, a successful business, business was doing $1.5 million in profits and continuing to grow year over year, which is great contracts. You have to handhold the seller, because the seller seems to think that because you signed a contract, an LOI, that, okay, cool, everything's good, you're going to be able to fund this and close in 30 days, and I'm going to get my millions of dollars, and I'm going to be off, and I'm going to go hang out on the beach and drink Mai Tais. No. All right. There is a transition period after you buy a business. So you have to negotiate with the seller to stick around for a while if they are somebody that's important to the business. And you need that knowledge transfer. Like, that's really important to get a knowledge transfer from the seller going through this process as well as after the fact. And sellers, they don't understand taxes most of the time. They don't understand capital gains at all. They don't realize that, oh, you don't know half the shit I know, because I have tribal knowledge, meaning stuff that I've accumulated over the years in my brain just from running this business that they have to then transfer to somebody else. They don't understand all that stuff. And so they get really flustered and say, this is taking too long. Maybe I should just keep doing it. Or we've had this happen. I can't tell you how many times this happened to us and other people that I've worked with. You start asking all these questions about, do you have this standard operating procedure? Okay, what's this person doing? And along the way, instead of just asking questions, you make suggestions. And because you're making suggestions, these are things that maybe the seller hadn't thought about before. And now they're saying, oh, well, I actually need to do that. Like, we actually had a company under contract earlier this year. It was doing roughly $5 million in profits. Okay. Seller was a young guy, great dude, have this incredible business. They had their marketing dialed in. They were selling products left and right. They were scaling up. They were doing on track, and they were doing over $3 million a month. Okay. Great business, very profitable, a lot of work, but he was just kind of running off of tribal knowledge and the fact that his team worked really well together, but nothing was documented. Nothing was working properly. I shouldn't say it wasn't working properly. Everything was working properly, but nothing was documented, which meant if somebody else left, got to think about this. If one of the key people leaves upon closing this business and buying it, or even shortly thereafter, because they don't like you, they like the seller, they like the person they work for, they don't like you, you're going to put some changes in place, they don't like that, they leave, Well, how are you going to replace that person? Right? You got to figure that out. So you have to have standard operating procedures in place. You have to have a training system in place. And so we started talking to this guy about that. Throughout the process, which it took 6 months to get through this, he goes, you know what? My business is worth double what I'm selling it to you guys for because my profits have increased. I'm not even going into the office anymore. This is amazing. My business literally runs on autopilot. He should have been thanking us for consulting with him. And it was dumbass moves on our part by asking questions that pointed him in the right direction of what to do. But because he did that, he no longer needed to even go into the office to run the business. And he's just getting profits every single month. That's an amazing business to have. Why would you sell it, right? So you have to handhold people like that without tipping your hat too much and telling them what to do to fix their business in the due diligence process, okay? The other person you're handholding is the banker, or in this case, the broker or the underwriter, okay? The underwriter is the person that writes up all the documentation to say, yes, this is a good loan to make, and here's why. We've checked all the boxes, we've done all this stuff, and they're asking for everything. They're asking for, of course, basics, name, rank, serial number, social security number, all that crap. But they're also asking for your financials. And then they're asking for personal financial statements and financial statements on the business that have to be updated on a regular basis. And they want to see the insurance policies. They want to see the contracts that you might have if there are suppliers and vendors and customers, and they want to see what those look like, right? You have to go through all of those things because any one of these could be a failure point, at which point somebody says, nope, we're not funding the deal anymore. Nope, we're out, whatever the case might be. And just in the last 12 months alone, I've had this happen at least a dozen times where somebody who is planning on funding the deal, likes everything you've told them about the deal, gets to the finish line and says, you know what? Actually, this little thing over here we don't like. Well, you never fucking asked about that in the first place, right? You never even told us this was an issue. And all of a sudden, that's the reason you're pulling out? It happens, all right? So you have to handle these people. So going back to Patriot Growth Capital, Zach is over there and he's literally handling every single person, which means he's on phone calls every single day, putting out fires. The attorneys that you get to help with the due diligence to make sure you're not buying a bad company are asking questions. So you, as the person who is buying a company, you are dealing with all this stuff and you're quarterbacking everything. You're learning a lot in the process, of course. You're learning all the requirements for underwriting. You're learning about what the legal team's looking at. You're learning about what the CFO and the financial people are looking at. You're learning what the seller's doing and how the business is operating. You have to go make site visits. You got to see that this thing's for real. Can't tell you how many times we've heard about people trying to buy a business that doesn't really exist, but they fabricated all this stuff for whatever reason, and they thought they were going to be able to make a quick buck, right? There's all these different things you have to think about. On top of that, when we first got involved in this, Trump had just gotten into office, and we're talking about tariffs and what's that going to mean for this business. And then all of a sudden the tariffs come out. There's a 100% tariff on the country that is supplying this business that we're buying all these products from that we're selling. Well, that changes the financial metrics completely. Did anybody account for that? Anybody think about that? Well, no, it's kind of hard to, right? But again, government risk is a thing, and you have to be thinking about these things. You have to be paying attention to what's happening in the broader economy, not just what's happening at the microcosm level inside this business. Because when you are buying on net 30 terms, net 60 terms, things like that, well, one, you lock in the payments from the suppliers, you buy the product, and that's the set price. But if something happens to them and all of a sudden there's no grandfather clause into the tariff thing and they have to charge you extra, well, that changes your margins on the product, and you have to be aware of that, which means you have to have somebody that understands financials and logistics and all of these things. Right? Anybody that tells you can go buy a business, no money down, no problem, it's super fucking simple. They're selling you a product, of course. I know some of these people, don't get me wrong, they're great people. They know what the fuck they're doing. And when they say no money down, they really mean no money out of your pocket. You can go get private investors to put the money up, which is what we did. And we had to explain to them, here's the risk, here's the challenge. You have to put a pitch deck together. You might need to put a PPM together, a note offering, a term sheet, a subscription agreement, all that other stuff. These are the things you have to do to be successful with that. Okay, there's a lot of things that go into buying a business and doing the due diligence, right? That's why when people join our club and they become a member, what they really like is the fact that we already know all this shit, and we do a lot of that for them. So yeah, they should still do their own due diligence. By the way, I'm not giving you financial advice here. I'm not your financial advisor. Always consult your legal and financial professionals whenever you're doing any of this shit. Now we got that shit out of the way so that I don't get in trouble. Realize that there is a process for reviewing deals. And in this day and age where it's so easy to fake fucking anything, AI can fake it. The news can fake stuff all day long. They can take all these things out of context. They can choose not to show you certain things. And because they didn't show you, it's a lie through omission. These are the things you have to deal with. So when people join our club, they realize that we know what the hell we're doing. And so we vetted a lot of stuff. Does that mean that we're perfect? No, of course not. Does that mean that we're going to catch everything? No, of course not. The fact is that there's only so much you can do, and there's still a leap of faith that you need to take. And that leap of faith that you're taking is completely based on your expertise, your experience, your skill sets, and your team. You need to have a team around you that you trust. All right. And that's the beautiful thing that we had going on at Patriot Growth Capital. We had an amazing team that filled different seats on the bus. And because of that, the deal was able to get done. Now, it took 6 months, 7 months, something like that, to finally go from LOI to closing the deal. Should they all take that long? No. But when you're buying a profitable business that's doing over $1 million, $2 million in profits, it's going to take a little bit longer, right? Because you're buying at a multiple of that, right? You can be buying it at a 3 multiple, a 6 multiple, which means, okay, let's just say it's doing $1 million of profits. You buy it at a 3x multiple. That means you're buying the business for $3 million. If you're buying it at a 6x multiple, you're buying it for $6 million. And you need to figure out what it's actually worth based off all those numbers. And, oh, by the way, there's this one little thing in there. We'll talk about this in a different podcast, add backs, right? Most small businesses, when they're being run by the founder, they are not using GAAP compliant financials and reporting, which means that they are using the business for their own personal piggy bank. Now, here's the simplest, easiest way I can explain GAAP financials done the right way. You, as a business owner, should be getting a salary, okay? If there are expenses that you feel the business should be paying for, then you should be creating an entry and having the business reimburse you for those expenses, right? But more often than not, what happens is they just use the company credit card. The company goes and buys it. And it's like, oh, cool. Well, that looks like it's a business expense. But then when the seller's going to sell it, they're like, no, that was a personal expense. So if I add that back in, hence add backs, if I add that back in, so instead of it being an expense, it's actually just crossed off the expense line item, it makes your profits look higher. Well, if your profits look higher, you can sell the business for more money. Right? This is the kind of stuff that you're going through. And this is what we've been going through for months with these guys, as well as getting the investors to understand all this, pitching them, helping them understand where they're going to wire their money, what they're going to do with it, what they're going to get in return for it, how much equity are they going to get, what's the cap table look like, all these different things. That's what happens. So again, when people join our club, which is really easy to get into the Mastermind Investment Club, it's only $5,000 a year. If that's too much for you, then it's the wrong club for you. If it's too little, just realize we just want to get you in the club so you can see deals. We can do deals together because we make our money doing deals, right? The kind of thing I'm talking about right here. That's how we make our money. That's why we want people to join. So yeah, I'm going to pitch this. I'm going to plug it from time to time because I really do believe that if you want to learn how to do this shit the right way and you want to be in the deals, not I want to learn how to raise money. I'm not bringing people like that into our club. If you want to actually do deals with people that know what the fuck they're doing, that's why you join the Mastermind Investment Club. Okay. So that's exactly what we do. We go through this whole process with everybody. The job of our team is to vet the deal so that you don't have to spend as much time vetting it. But of course, you need to look into it yourself. All right. So anyway, this is not a sales pitch. I'm here to tell you what it takes to go through and buy a profitable company. Don't buy problems, by the way. There's too many good companies out there that you can buy the right way. And it's a lot easier to do than a lot of people think, even that I made it sound. It's a lot of work, but it's way better than buying a problem that you have to then go fix. Okay. So anyway, put your money to work, put your mind to work, get out there and crush it. See ya.